In this video, I'm going to show you 4 more brand new custom weapons you can make in Fortnite Creative 1.0. And there's no UEFN needed for this. I've got a double jump weapon coming up, and I've even got a teleporting gun, which is really sick. But first, let's come on to this weapon, which is low gravity. So once again, we're going to need an input trigger. The input type is standard action, and the standard input is just jump. So this is going to give them a longer jumping height and show on HUD to off. And then you're going to need a conditional button. And it's the same settings as the other conditional buttons in other videos. So it can be used by to all, allow interaction to off, consume key items to off, and require holding item to on. And then scroll across to the functions tab and put activate when receiving from the input trigger we just set up on input pressed. And I've renamed all these devices like I do in every video. If you want to do that, go up to the top and press LT up there for me, and then A, and then you can rename the device. I put boost up for this. Then you're going to need a player movement device. And for the settings in this, add to players on start to off, because we obviously don't want all the players to have this at the start of the game. And then put the jump velocity to the maximum. At the moment that's 1000, but you can really put this to wherever you want. And the air control, I put that to the highest, which means you have lots of control mid-air. But it's really up to you if you want to do that. Then put add to player when receiving from the conditional button on activated. And then guys, what we're going to need is a delay to remove this boosted jump, because otherwise they're going to have it infinitely with other weapons when they switch weapons. So what you're going to need is, you're going to need a trigger, and for the settings in this, put the visible during games to off. The trigger delay is however long you want the boosted jump to be enabled for the player, so I put 1 second, and then trigger for effects and sound effects to off. Then put trigger when receiving from to the conditional button on activated, and then on the events tab, put on triggered send event to player movement device remove from player. And then at the end guys, you're going to want to drop in whatever weapon you want to have this low gravity effect. So for me, I've done the ray gun, but it's obviously whatever you want to do. Now guys, we're going to come on to the double jump weapon. This is pretty sick. Okay guys, so first what you're going to need is an input trigger, and for the settings in this, put the standard type to standard action and the standard input to fire and show on HUD to off. Then place down a conditional button, and it's the exact same settings as the previous one, and activate when receiving from the input trigger on input pressed. Make sure it's this one when you just set up. And then guys, we're going to use a separate input trigger to track when the player jumps. But first we're going to need a trigger delay, because we don't want them to double jump as soon as they shoot their shockwave. So first place down a trigger and rename it to delay or something. Put the visible during games to off. The trigger delay, I put 0.75 because that's about how long it takes for the shockwave to activate. And trigger for effects and sound effects to off. And then put trigger when receiving from to the conditional button on activated. Then guys, we're going to set up another input trigger. Put the input type to standard action, and standard input is to jump, because we're going to need to track when they jump. And for this one, I've actually shown it on the HUD, so it appears on the screen when they can double jump. So put the show on HUD to on, and put a HUD description to double jump, or something like that. And then scroll to the bottom, and you're going to want to put register player behavior to require registered, because we're only going to want the player who actually gets registered by this device to be able to double jump. So make sure register player when receiving from is the trigger we just set up, the trigger delay on triggered. And then guys, we can place down a movement modifier, which is actually going to give them the boost up. So for the settings, put effect movement speed to off, apply impulse to on, and then the forward impulse and upward impulse, you could obviously customize this to whoever you want. For me, I've done 2000 up and 1000 forwards. It's really up to you what you want to do. And then scroll across to the functions and put activate when receiving from the input trigger, the second one we just set up, on input pressed. And then guys, we're going to need a separate trigger which has a delay, just like the previous one with the low gravity, to actually remove this double jump effect, because we don't want them to be able to double jump forever. So in this trigger, put visual games to off. The trigger delay is however long you want the players to be able to double jump when it gets enabled to them. So I'm going to do 2 seconds, because they stay about 2 seconds in the air, but you can put that to wherever you want. Trigger for effects and sound effects, make sure you turn those to off, because they are quite annoying. And then trigger when receiving from is the conditional button on activated. So it's getting triggered when the conditional button is activated, and then on triggered it's going to make the input trigger, the second one, to unregister the player. So then they won't be able to double jump after 2 seconds. And then guys, go back to your movement modifier and go to the events tab and put on activation send event to the input trigger to unregister the player. So if the player does end up double jumping, we're going to stop them from double jumping anymore by removing them from the registered. Now this one's a really exciting one guys. I know a lot of you have been wanting to have this, and this is actually a teleport gun. So the input trigger is the same settings, standard action and standard input is to fire and show on HUD to off. Then go to the conditional button, and the settings are the same as the other one, as you can see here. And activate when receiving from is the input trigger on input pressed, and then drop in whatever weapon you want to be the teleporting gun. So for me, I've done a scope revolver, but you could obviously do whatever you want. And then guys, what we're going to do is we're going to give him a class, and then basically only that class will be able to teleport. So place down a class selector, and I've renamed it to teleport. And for the settings, put the class to switch to a class you haven't used yet on your map. So for me, I've done class 1, and then volume visible during games, and visible during games to off, activation audio off, and zone audio off, and display of free effects on activation to off. Those settings are just all really annoying, so I like turning them off. And change player to class from seen from the conditional button we just set up on activated. So when they do shoot with this weapon you put in here, then it's going to give them this class. And then guys, you're going to need to place down a trigger, and this is once again going to be a delay, so they don't stay in this class forever. We're only going to have them in this class for 0.5 seconds. So for the settings, put visible during games to off. The trigger delay, I recommend 0.5 seconds or 0.25, it's really up to you. Trigger for effects and sound effects, turn that to off. And then trigger when seen from the conditional button on activated. And then we're going to need another class selector, which is going to make him go back to no class. So just copy this one over, and for the class to switch to, make sure you put it to no class. And then change player to class when seen from, it's the trigger we just set up on triggered. And then go to the functions tab and put change player to class when seen from the trigger we just set up on triggered. Make sure it's only this trigger and not the conditional button. You're going to have to remove that from in here. Make sure this second class selector only changes the player to the class when seen from the trigger we just set up. Okay guys, now the fun part, we're actually going to set up where the players can teleport. So what you're going to need is a trigger, and in the trigger settings, put the activating class to the same class you had on that class selector. So for me, that was class 1. And then put visible during games off, triggered by player off. Trigger by damage, you're going to want that to be on, and then trigger by vehicles off, trigger by sequences off, trigger by water off, and then turn off the trigger VFX and sound effects because they are really annoying. And then receive damage while invisible, you're going to want to put that to take damage, so it can actually take damage while it's invisible. And then guys, you're going to want to put a teleporter right in front of that, and for the settings, put the teleporter group and target group to none, teleporter riff visible, and visual effects and sound effects to no. Deserve momentum, you can put that to yes if you want, but I'd put it to no. And then face player and teleporter direction, I recommend you put this to relative, so wherever the player is looking, then once they get teleported, they'll look in that direction as well. Then scroll across to the functions tab and put teleport when receiving from the trigger we just set up on triggered. And I recommend you rename this to something like T or teleport, so you know what these two do. And your trigger won't look like this, it's not going to be this big, so when you bring it out, it'll be this big. And then what you're going to want to do is, if you're going to have it on a wall, you're going to need to rotate it. So put the rotation axis to pitch, and then put it up a bit, and then it will be flat. And then all you have to do is resize it a bit, and if you put it to all, it won't fit a wall perfectly. So then you can put the resize axis to width and make it a bit wider, and then it will fit over a tile. I recommend you do 1 teleporter per tile, because otherwise you're going to be placing millions of teleporters, and you don't really want to do that. If you did 2 for each tile, that would be a bit too much. And if you want the trigger to be on the floor, what you have to do is put the rotation axis to pitch, and then pitch it down to the floor. And then if you had it on the floor, you're going to want the wall and the floor. If you're doing it next to a wall, you want both triggers to be teleporting to the teleporter in front of it. If you're just doing a trigger that's on the floor, then obviously you only have that trigger and the teleporter on top of it. And then to make this process really quick and easy, all you have to do is multi-select the trigger and multi-select the teleporter, and then you copy that, and then just copy it on every wall you need this to be on. And the settings will copy over, and the good thing is the teleporter is only activated from the trigger in front of it, which is really helpful. You won't need to separately go into every teleporter and every trigger to change the on teleported, which is really helpful for this. Now it is a shame you can't teleport to wherever you want or teleport onto players' builds. That is a real shame, but in Creative 1.0 that just simply isn't possible. So that is a real shame, but this is the best thing we have at the moment. And now finally I'm going to show you how to make a one-tap sword, so the sword will instantly kill anyone it touches. Now this is really simple with the melee designer. And for the settings, I've used the sword. You could use a hammer or a sword, it's really up to you, but I've used the sword. And then display name, I put this to one tap sword, and the rarity, I put it to legendary. And then all you're going to want to do is copy these settings right here. So the basic attack to players is 500, and AI is 500, and environmental is 500. Knockback, I don't really think that matters because you're going to be instant killing them, but I'll just put it to 0, and the same with the AI. Then the critical hit chance, I put it to 100, and the critical hit damage multiplier, I put it to 10, just so it does the maximum amount of damage. But 500 should be enough anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but yeah. Then the charge attack, I put that to the maximum damage, and the charge attack knockback, it doesn't really matter, 0. And then the jump attack damage to 500, and the jump attack knockback to 0, it doesn't really matter. And the sprint attack damage to 500, and then the sprint attack knockback, it doesn't really matter. And then use custom color, I put that to yes, and I put the custom color to yellow, so it like glows a gold color. And I put the custom color intensity to 100, and the weapon glow intensity. And then to get the weapon out of the device, all you're going to want to do is go to the top here, and it says spawn weapon, and then you can get the weapon out here, and then you can place it wherever you want to drop it into an item spawner or item placer, or wherever you want to put it. Make sure to go check out part 1 and 2, which are on screen right now. I got loads of more custom weapons for you to make. Like and sub if you found this tutorial helpful, and thanks for watching this video, guys. Peace.